dominate Oscar nominations with more nominations than any other studio by a lot. 35 nominations for the Oscars this Sunday. For today, we're going to have 5 conversations with different leaders across the film and television space. For these interviews, I'm going to be joined by my colleague and friend, Deirdre Bosa. Dee, thanks so much for joining us today. We've got a great lineup. We have Kevin Mayer. He's chairman of DAZN, DAZN, but I'm told it's pronounced DAZN. Forssell, HBO Max EVP and GM. He is the engineer of HBO Max. We also have Liz Jenkins. She's Hello Sunshine COO. Franklin Leonard, the CEO of The Blacklist, and Tim League, who's the founder of Alamo Drafthouse Cinema, among many other things. So Dee, I know we talk a lot about tech on TechCheck, but now we're talking about how tech and entertainment have really converged.
I got to get something out of the way, Julia, okay? I am here as a tech reporter, not a movie critic, so I have to admit to you, to our audience, I have seen maybe 2 movies on this list. So I'm here for the comments on tech. I'm sure that you've seen many of them, Julia, but I know you can stream them all now. And
you can stream them all now. I mean, Dee, this is the thing. This year, you can watch every single movie, I believe, at least the ones nominated for Best Picture, without leaving your house. You have Nomadland on Netflix. You have Minari Nomadland on Hulu. I don't want to get anything wrong here. You have Minari. You have films like Trial of the Chicago 7, which I was just finishing last night on Netflix. So a totally different way of watching these movies. But Dee, I think the whole point of this show is we're not reviewing these movies. Yes. That is the job of professional film critics. We just want to understand where this whole industry is headed. And that is a conversation I had today with the CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment, Tony Vinciquerra. I want to play the sound that we just got from our interview with him today, because they just made this big deal. Sony made this big deal with Netflix to get 18 months for their sort of first window of streaming after films are in theaters and then home video. And then another deal yesterday, they just made another deal with Disney to get the films in the window after Netflix. Let's take a listen.
Affect the number or the quality of the films that we're going to be putting into theaters. We're still going to do 15 to 20 films per year that go into theaters. And we're very, very excited about the pattern now that's taking place where people are excited to go back to theaters. The deal that with Netflix, we have tremendous capacity, and it was not economical to put more films into theaters. Now we have another outlet. It's an additional business line for us, and we're very excited about it. We set a strategy 3.5, 4 years ago to be the Switzerland of programmers, where we will sell to everyone. Our creators are excited about that. And the Seinfeld deal that we did last year, the Netflix deal and the Disney deal are evidence that the strategy is absolutely working.
Well, they are certainly the arms dealer here, really taking a different strategy, Dee. Now, one thing I'm curious for your perspective.
Imagine that too, Julia, a media company without a streaming platform. We don't talk about that.
I guess that's the thing. There can only be so many streaming platforms, right? So one thing that's interesting is if you look at the streaming platforms like Amazon, which you cover so closely, they have a streaming platform. They have a big presence here in Hollywood, but their intentions for their streaming platform are so different. They just announced, 200 million Prime subscribers? How would you say that they think of the video piece as crucial to holding on to those Prime subscribers? Because they don't have to worry about making money on that content.
Right, yet they are pouring money into content. It's interesting when you look at an Amazon versus a Netflix, which spend so much money on content. That's sort of the one thing that they do. Amazon is about this flywheel, right? They have a giant e-commerce business, a giant cloud business. So streaming is kind of justifying that Prime membership, the money that 200 million households pay for every single year. So the hope, I think, with Amazon is that you put out some good content. You have people coming to Amazon Prime for movies and now football, by the way, right, Julia? I know you covered this closely. We're going to talk to Kevin Mayer about this. And that is to get people more locked in. Another issue that we talk about in tech all the time, from the Apple ecosystem to the Google ecosystem to the Amazon one. And that's, a question for Netflix too, right? You just reported on their quarterly earnings. And the big question for them is, are they going to do something else? Do they need to do something else? Is it video game? Do they need to get into the cloud like the other players? Is it too late. But, one thing is consistent across all these guys. They are spending so much money on content.
Yeah, $17 billion for Netflix
and it's paying
this
off
year.
as we look ahead to the Oscars, right?
Well,
it's paying that.
It's paying off in terms of Oscar nominations, which I think helps secure top talent. But if you look at the growth that was slowing in the first quarter and the second quarter, I think the question is how much of that is really about pandemic-related delays.
Yes.
But let's pause here because Dee and I could keep talking forever. Let's bring in Kevin Mayer, chairman of DAZN, former executive at Disney, responsible for launching Disney Plus, which went on to great success, briefly at TikTok, and now investing in a huge range of businesses. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Julia. And is it Deirdre or Dee?
Both work. You can call me Dee, especially on the OTT platform.
Yeah, when we stream, we call her Dee. So,
Okay.
Got to keep it casual.
Alternate ego.
Kevin, you relatively recently made this move to become chairman of DAZN. Tell us why. You knew ESPN so well. You know how expensive sports rights are. Why would you get into the streaming sports business when you know that you're up against these giants?
Well, look, if you can connect an audience with high quality in-market sports programming, there's money to be made there. I think it's relatively independent of how it's presented to the consumer. It can be part of a pay TV package like ESPN has been for a long time. It can be a buy up in a pay TV package like Sky does in Europe and other European pay TV operators do, or it can be a direct over the top subscription service. And I just feel there's value in sports rights. Consumers love them. They're soccer, or they call it football in Europe. They're football mad. And we were able to secure the top rights in Italy called Serie A rights. At DAZN, we have the Bundesliga rights in Germany, which is, again, their soccer league, their big soccer league there. And there are other markets in Europe where we're going to work to secure those rights. And we deliver them over the top via the internet and streaming. They're valuable. Consumers love them. They're willing to pay for them. Big fan bases. I'm just a big believer in the value of sports streaming, if that's your focus. I'm not sure that Netflix will ever get into sports streaming. I don't think it's required. It's you have to focus on it. You have to be dedicated to it. But if you do it right, and if you secure the right rights in the right markets and present it in a high quality way to consumers, you can win and make a lot of money.
So what's going to happen to ESPN? How much of their content are they going to move over to ESPN Plus? And what's going to happen to the bundle? I mean, is the bundle just going to be destroyed? How few households do you think will really end up subscribing to pay TV? Is it 50 million?
It's very hard to predict the future with any pinpoint accuracy. I made a career of not trying to predict the future when I was at Disney, just trying to understand the mega trends. But there's certainly the underlying mega trend there is that people are trying to buy content more precisely. The massive bundle that includes news, sports, entertainment, all of the things that people may or may not be interested in. I think that's challenging in these days when you can do more pinpoint accurate purchasing. So I do think that you're going to see an attenuation of that bundle, the size of that bundle over time, the number of people it will appeal to. At some point, you might say, hey, the bundle is going to just be people that love sports because all the other entertainment programming is available elsewhere through over-the-top subscriptions. And at that point, you have to wonder, does it make sense for any of the sports providers to continue to wholesale to a sports audience, or should they retail to a sports audience and move their content to an over-the-top offering? And I think that's what not only Disney, but all the other sports providers are struggling with and will do more so over time.
Well, yeah, no, Dee and I were just talking about Amazon investing more in this space with those NFL rights. What do you make of that? I mean, Deirdre was just talking about, those 200 million Prime subscribers. How big of a player do you think they'll become in sports?
And Kevin, I wonder if you were throwing a little bit of shade a few moments ago. You said that you have to focus only on shade, so Netflix wouldn't be in the position to do this, but Amazon is kind of focusing on everything, right? Can they do this successfully?
Well, you never count out Amazon or Netflix from anything. They've been incredibly successful, and I have a lot of admiration for both companies and all the products. Look, I think it makes sense. I think it was either Julia or Dee, you said that it's a strategic component of an offering for Prime. I do think if you talk to Amazon and understand their business model, Prime subscribers are just undertake a lot more e-commerce activity than a non-Prime subscriber. So anything you can do to add value to Prime and get people into that ecosystem is probably valuable from an overall e-commerce standpoint for Amazon. The question I would have is, do you have to do that in every territory? Do you have to do that only in certain places? Does it make sense to spend $1 billion a year, which is the reported expense for the NFL rights in the US? Does it actually have that sort of measurable either attraction of new Prime customers or retention of Prime customers that otherwise would turn out of Prime? That's going to remain to be seen. And I just don't know that we know for sure how that experiment will play out. But I think that a focus like I'm talking about DAZN has in Europe and Asia, that sort of laser-like focus. I'm just sports. I'm serving sports consumers. That's what I do for my entire existence. That's why we exist. I think it does offer a little bit of a different experience than someone who's doing that for strategic benefit to other parts of their business. Not that Amazon isn't great. I'm sure they will make it work, but there's something to be said for focus.
No, you just praised Netflix, but I got to ask about those earnings numbers. Netflix first quarter subscriber additions fell way short of estimates, and then the second quarter looks like it's going to be even rougher. Is this a temporary blip? Is it just because so much of that growth was pulled forward into last year? What's your long-term outlook for which and how many of these services can survive and thrive?
Yeah, well, I think it is probably a bit of a blip. I think the Netflix management took great pains to make sure everyone understood there was a pull forward of demand when they got those incredible numbers during the pandemic. So I do believe there's a lot of truth in that. I think a lot of demand that otherwise would materialize over a year or two would pull forward into several quarters. So I think we're seeing the effect of that. I think they also had difficulty with some productions, as everyone did during the pandemic. So I think probably a little light on original content right now. Although I love The Serpent, for instance, it's a great show. I'm just watching it now. They're going to be a big winner. They already are. That's already been determined. Netflix is a huge winner in this space. Doesn't mean there's not room for other winners as well. And I don't think everyone has to measure themselves against how Netflix does. Netflix isn't necessarily the bogey that you're after to determine success. I think you just want to serve your consumers as best you can, grow a profitable business to be as large as it deserves to be, given the fans you have out there and the total addressable market that is relevant. And I think if you use that yardstick, there are many winners that can emerge here on a global platform basis to really sort of get to the sort of scale that Netflix is at. Look, you have Amazon; they're there already. Disney Plus is there already, or just about to get there, and maybe one or two more. But again, you don't have to be a scaled multi-hundred million subscriber SVOD service to be successful.
Yeah, and before we talk HBO Max and bring in Andy Forssell, I just want to ask you a question about your investment strategy. You're on these SPACs, you're doing investing. You did this Beachbody deal, streaming, fitness content, which surprised a lot of people, but in a way really fits into your thesis. I'm just wondering if, looking at these numbers of the past couple quarters, looking at the future post-pandemic, really where you see all the streaming media stuff going, where's the real opportunity here?
My thesis is that the intersection of content, commerce, and technology, that's going to yield a massive amount of opportunity. I think that you can do commerce without content. You can do content without commerce. You can ignore the technological revolution at your peril. But when all those intersect, like I saw at TikTok, for instance, where you have video streaming, you have the opportunity to sell to your audiences. You have a highly, highly engaged audience that is taking your cue as to what they should be purchasing, what brands they should be interested in. When you wrap that all together, that intersection is where I feel there's a huge amount of financial upside that we're going to see, and that's what I'm focused on throughout all my endeavors. It's really that intersection of content, commerce, and technology, which I am pursuing. And Beachbody is a great example of that. They have great fitness content that you subscribe to. They have great nutritional content, again through subscriptions, and they have a Peloton competitor in mixed fitness, again a digital purchase and a subscription. It's the intersection of those three things, which I think is really fascinating and will be more so as we move forward.
Well, I'm really curious to see what you do next with your SPAC. But stick with us, Kevin. We're going to play some sound from John Stankey, and then we are going to bring in your old friend, Andy Forssell, who I know you've known for a while. So Andy, you're on deck, but I want to play some sound from John Stankey's interview on CNBC this morning. AT&T reporting better than expected results. HBO Max growing faster than anticipated. Hi, Andy. Let's listen to this sound, then we'll be right back. Or maybe we won't play this sound. I could summarize what he says. I'm going to give it a B.
It's more fun than live TV,
Yeah,
Julia.
it's like live TV.
This is
Okay,
all
so
okay.
we do not have the soundbite from John Stanky. Wait, or do we? Do we?
We have Stanky, we just don't have him talking.
No, we don't have talking. So the summary is HBO Max growing faster than expected. Andy, thank you for joining us. You probably know Kevin from your days at Hulu many years ago.
Yes, we do.
Since
Good to see you,
then,
Kevin. Congratulations.
And thank you.
in the time between Hulu and your launching of HBO Max, Andy, you worked at Otter Media and a number of other places. So you really have a really broad sense of what's going on in the media landscape. And actually, Crunchyroll, all these different sort of niche streaming apps. And here you are, you launched HBO Max. The company just did better than expected quarterly additions of new subscribers, and the guidance seems very strong. Tell us what's going on with HBO Max. How would you position the numbers that were reported today, the 3 million additions, right?
Sure. It was 2.7. Look, I love hearing Kevin's enthusiasm for this. I feel the same way. If you can't have fun in this business, there's something wrong with you. We're listening to customers. The customers get to decide, as Jason has said many times publicly. We added, if you look at where HBO was last spring, you go back 4 quarters, we've added 11 million subscribers to the HBO Max, HBO total in the year in the US. Capped off with this last quarter, 2.7, as you said. On the direct-to-consumer side, that was 40% growth from Q4. So we're super happy with that momentum. Customers get to decide that they like what they're doing. I can talk about some of the dynamics, but I'll pause and let you steer me on that.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to hear the dynamics. I'm also curious what you make of Netflix's growth in the US slowing. This was the 3rd straight quarter that Netflix saw under 1 million new subscriber additions in the US. Do you think that's just because the market here is saturated for Netflix, or do you think there's something going on more broadly with the industry? Was it a pull forward, or do you think there's a COVID trend here?
Well, I'll say 2 things. I agree with Kevin. Look, they had a phenomenal year last year. The pull forward thing, Spence Newman commented that's on that this morning. I think there's plenty of truth to that. The counter is it's a more competitive marketplace. It's going to be more competitive. I don't think that had a massive impact on Netflix's quarter, but this is now, we are all competing for the same hours, for the same content. And so for all of us, it gets more competitive. You can't wave that away.
Dee, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I got a question for both of you guys. I want to get to the Oscars because it's obvious that the streaming platforms have dominated the nominations, but some people say that's because all the big releases were pulled due to the pandemic. So what do you think is going to happen in terms of the actual winners, the victors? Are we going to see streaming platforms win in a big way going forward? I mean, the field is littered this year, but is that because of the pandemic or is that despite it?
I'll do a quick comment, and Kevin, you should pile on. Look, I think will the streamers win or will theatrical win? That's going to matter less to consumers. These are great films. It doesn't matter where they show up. That, I think, is evolution that does help the streamers with credibility, but I don't think it hurts theaters. We just had Godzilla versus Kong do phenomenally well on HBO Max and set records at the box. So I think it's a new world. Certainly, you can be credible, and having Shaka King and Daniel Kaluuya on Judas and the Black Messiah on our service was fantastic. They trusted us with that movie, but it did really well. So I think these are great movies. It matters less where they're showing.
I guess I
Kevin,
would.
do you think it matters?
No, I don't. I think consumers just love to be entertained. I think Andy hit it exactly correctly. Consumers want to be entertained. It is going to not even strike their consciousness. Was this a streaming premiere? Was it a premiere in theaters? Was it both at the same time, which I think we'll see more and more and more of? I agree. It's just whatever the best movies are, hopefully they win. They don't always win, but hopefully they will time and time again. And
Does it matter though for the movies that get made? And Julia knows much more about what goes into a Hollywood movie, but do streamers seem to favor one kind of movie? Does it sort of eliminate the more independent studios that might make less blockbusters, more interesting movies? Does it matter what actually gets to the streaming platforms or the theaters if that shift happens at the Oscars?
Well, I'll maybe start off with that. I think that the Oscars have over-indexed to independent productions for over a decade now. You see a lot of Oscars being won, including Best Picture, by independent producers. And I would say that in some ways, that's the streaming phenomenon might favor that continuing somewhat, because if you don't have to go to a movie theater to see some of these smaller films, and you can see them in a streaming context, I think the audiences will be much larger. 200 plus subscribers to Netflix, 100 plus to Disney Plus, 200 plus to Amazon. These are places where a premiere can reach a massive audience. With the push of a button, people can watch these films. So I think if nothing else, it might continue to have that effect. The smaller films will maybe continue to over-index at the awards.
I just add 2 years ago, I think you heard lots of worries that, the only movies that'll get made now are huge superhero movies. Nobody complains about that anymore. More films are getting made. That's great for fans. The big superhero movies are great. They're going to continue to get made. Some will be in theaters, some will be on streaming, but the smaller and medium movies are getting made. It's a great time to be a fan.
So I want to dig in a little bit more with you, Andy. Kevin, I'm going to let you go and go finish watching whatever Oscar movies you haven't watched yet.
Thank you. Nice seeing you both.
Andy, don't go anywhere. Kevin, thanks
Andy,
for joining us. I hope we'll have you back on TechCheck soon. Andy, I have to say, Andy, when we're talking about streaming, we're talking about HBO Max. What HBO Max has done this year is really unusual. Putting films in theaters the same day they're available on streaming. I know some people in my household were very excited to watch Godzilla versus Kong without having to leave the house. I know that HBO Max and Warner Media have said this is simply something that's going to be just because of the pandemic, just for this year. But for you, as someone who is running a streaming platform, what are the numbers that you're seeing from Godzilla versus Kong that we haven't seen? What do they tell you about the way consumers think about watching at home versus watching in the theater?
Well, it is a very odd year. It's hard to extrapolate from. I think you'll see a lot of experimentation next year with different models. But to your question, look, we saw people come in. I think the fascinating thing we've seen is the interplay between these movies and great TV that we have, and then the next movie. In the theatrical world, the success of one film doesn't help the next film. Whereas in streaming, we had millions of people come in for Wonder Woman. Almost all of them immediately watched The Flight Attendant, which was a great series from an HBO Max original that had debuted in November. Literally millions of people watched The Flight Attendant. You could see them, roll through 8 eps of that in the weeks after Wonder Woman. Then by the end of January, we had another day and date movie with The Little Things with Denzel Washington. The Wonder Woman audience stayed around. So the interplay of that content is fantastic. I think there are opportunities here to do things going forward where the strength of one title, whether it be TV or film, can help another. That's different than the traditional world. And I think it's great for the audience.
So a quick final question, because we're running out of time. Number one, do you think you're cannibalizing the theatrical ticket sales? And number two, how many subscriptions do you think people will have?
The last one first. The boring answer is nobody knows. I guess I'd come out to say, look, I think there are going to be 3 or 4 worldwide global services with real scale, with probably 300 million plus subscribers, maybe higher. It depends on the developing world and how fast that moves. I'm talking in a decade's time. I think that'll happen, and I think scale matters. And it doesn't. I think that's going to happen. How many each individual has? I think you're going to have plenty of people that have a lot of subscriptions. You're going to have smaller people that have their 1 or 2 go-tos. But consumers are going to tell us, and it's a decade-long experiment to answer that question. In terms of cannibalization, I mentioned Godzilla versus Kong, fantastic combination. That's during COVID. Next year, you'll see us put some films into theaters. As Jason said not too long ago, probably a shorter window, but there'll be films that are theatrical only first window, and then you'll see a bunch of others come directly to streaming. I think the other services are going to do the same thing, and consumers are going to vote with their money and their time and their clicks and tell us what they like.
Very exciting times for your business. And we're going to hear more about what the theatrical experience is going to have to be like to get me off my couch, because I love watching your movies the same time they're in theaters without leaving my home. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. I hope you'll come back and tell us about the ad-supported version of HBO Max, which I know is going to launch this summer.
Happy to. Thanks to you both.
Thanks. Now, Dee, so interesting to see how this whole industry has changed. I mean, it's amazing that HBO Max is less than a year old now. Our next guest is Liz Jenkins. Liz, you're on deck. And Dee, I don't know if you haven't seen a lot of movies. I hope you've been watching some of Liz's TV shows. Liz, COO of Hello Sunshine, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So just for those of our viewers who are not totally familiar with the media machine that is Hello Sunshine, this is Reese Witherspoon's production company. Liz is COO, and Liz has been helping this company grow to be a supplier to so many different platforms. One of my favorite shows of the past year, The Morning Show, an Apple TV show. You've got that one. Another one of my favorite shows, Little Fires Everywhere on Hulu. That was the most successful show Hulu's ever had. Liz, describe to us this idea of a cross-platform, omni-channel media company.
You know, at the end of the day, what we're really trying to build is the modern media company. And I think we had the luxury of being able to start with a blank piece of paper. Reese and our CEO, Sarah Harden, over 4 years ago, seeking to build a company that was unique with a mission to change the narrative for women through storytelling at the center of everything we do. And so it means not just building for television or linear television or streaming, but building really intentionally for every single platform, reaching our audience wherever they are. If they're on Hulu, if they're on HBO Max or Instagram, Audible, etc.
And just explain a little bit about how to me, the most fascinating parts of this business are the fact that you have this direct relationship with your fans through Instagram and also through Reese's book club. And so you really understand what they want, what they like, and you can talk to them. But also you're not tied to any one of these platforms. So how do you decide where to put your content?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'll pause and talk about Reese's book club for a second, because what I think is really incredible is, you know, book club has been around for a long time. It's been, you know, a sense of community for women for like decades. And, you know, Reese's book club was the first really digital native book club, started on Instagram. And we recently extended that and launched an app back in February, because our audience was clamoring for more. They really wanted to engage with each other about the books that they were reading, hear from Reese directly sometimes, and the authors as well, you know? And so I think with everything, whether it's our long form content or short form content, it's thinking about what's the right fit? What's the right piece of content for this audience? Where are there gaps currently in the marketplace? And how do people like to consume content in their car versus, you know, on at home listening to their phone, or, you know, in their living room, kick back and relax. So I think that having the benefit of being able to do that in a way that feels really authentic and organic is what enhances the experience for our audience.
You know, Hello Sunshine has just been such a force in female storytelling. I have Julia seen the TV shows. I was telling her that I haven't watched too many of the Oscar movies nominations this year. I have 2 young kids, and it's so interesting because, you know, we watch a lot of animation. So I have seen Onward, I have seen Soul. And my husband and I were talking the other day about how many movies now have female protagonists. And from Moana to Frozen to all the movies that my kids love, and it has my son talking and really idolizing these female protagonists. So we're seeing that more and more, certainly at that animation level. What do you think about the representation this year in terms of Oscar nominations? Do you think that it's diverse enough in terms of gender and race?
You know, look, I think I'm proud of the strides the Academy has made, and we as like Hollywood have made in terms of being more inclusive. You know, if you were to look back at when Hello Sunshine was founded, I want to say 4% of films were directed by women, where like women make up over half of, you know, the movie going audience. And so this year, it's great to see more representation than ever from women and women of color in all categories. You know, I think I'd love to see us get to a place where we are more than representing our numbers in the general like population, you know, because I think what's so incredible is, when content is authored authentically, like, the example you gave, Julia, for Little Fires Everywhere, I mean, that writer's room really reflected the stories that we were telling. And when content's authored that way, it resonates in a different way when, the stories really reflect our own experience.
And I'm muted. This is live streaming the age of Zoom. You're talking about all these TV shows, and I know you do have some films in development, but up until now, everything you've done has been series. And I say TV, but it could be for Apple or Hulu. Not really television. And I'm wondering, as we look ahead to the Oscars, as we talk about the evolution of the movie industry, where you see the opportunity as an independent production company that is targeting a female audience. Why haven't you made more movies, and what does that say about the way the business is set up?
Well, one thing that is exciting, I'll put in a plug for Where the Crawdads Sing. We are going into production with Sony on that movie on Monday. We start filming, so it's very exciting, and really happy that will be, our first Hello Sunshine feature project. But, to answer your question, I think what's fascinating is it really reflects some of the challenges that I think are an independent studio could face in the current day and age. If I look back to, several years ago, it was almost the reverse. I think you saw fewer independent television studios because of all of the vertical integration that existed, because of a lack of a vibrant independent sales marketplace for television content, and it's kind of flipped. And so I think that what's interesting is there are a different set of trade-offs, when you think about how do I monetize a film asset? What's the return on a pretty steep investment when you consider both the actual production cost and the marketing cost for a given film? So, I think for Hello Sunshine, we have very quietly set up many projects with its streamers as well as traditional studios for theatrical release. So I think you'll see more to come from us in that area soon. But it really reflects kind of the intention behind how we're trying to build this and responding to what we're seeing in the marketplace from a business perspective.
But when you look at the types of movies that are still going to get a big theatrical release, it's Godzilla versus Kong, it's these superhero movies that there's so much attention to. Can a smaller budget movie, even starring big celebrity, actresses, succeed at the box office? Or is the way the industry is changing, and especially because the bar is so much higher to leave your house and go to the theaters, do you think films targeting women are just not going to have as much of a chance to succeed when it comes to selling actual tickets?
I actually don't believe that's true. I mean, I think that when, we're trying to create content for everyone. There's a woman at the center of this story, but I get as many calls and texts from men talking about the morning show as I do from women, honestly. But, I think that it's the quality of the film. It's the urgency. That's what gets us, off of the couch. Sometimes it's perhaps the spectacle of it all. But, I think for a long time, the horror movies, those aren't, or comedies, those aren't traditionally like high budget movies, but there's something about that communal experience of viewing. So I think it's really just thinking about, to the same point around content in the right channel, it's thinking similarly about what is a theatrical film today, right? What is the type of film where someone is gonna leave home, get a babysitter, drive to the movie theater and show up? And I don't think it's a model where we have to force things through one distribution channel or not. But I can tell you, I can't wait to go back to the movie theater very soon.
Same. I didn't. It took me about 8 months to actually get to that spot where I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go back."
That is
but it's
true.
going to be a good experience, like in Alamo, Julie. I know we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. That's coming up next. Alamo is a long favorite of mine. So yeah.
And Liz, just a final question. This idea of being omni-channel, that is a word I hear from everybody. The idea of being omni-channel. When you think about all the different business lines, podcasts, books, streamers, movies, where else can you go? And do you think you're going to start making money directly from social media? Or do you think social media is just going to be a marketing tool for your products?
For us, what's interesting, I think we've been fortunate, again, building kind of from scratch, that social media for us wasn't about marketing kind of the main event over here. Like, hey guys, go see this movie on Friday. It's really been about extending and expanding our relationship with our audience and building a strong consumer facing brand, as well as, you know, a B2B brand in Los Angeles. You know, so I think what's been incredible, actually, we launched Reese's Book Club, the app I mentioned we launched in February. Well, last week, we launched our first sort of commerce offering. So it was the gift of reading, a box that was launched exclusively to our members of the readership. And I will tell you that box sold out within hours. We launched a second run the next day and it also sold out. And I think what that really demonstrates is, you know, the power of having built that authentic relationship with our audience, one that wasn't about just monetizing them for the sake of, you know, generating revenue, but really listening to them. And the results have been fantastic. We will be, you know, launching it again later this year. And, you know, I think you'll see more of that. It is in that intersection of, you know, content and community and commerce. It is even more relevant than ever. And I think people want to buy, you know, from like brands that share their values, brands that they feel connected to on an emotional level as well.
Well, it's just amazing. It's amazing seeing the power of brands to reach across all these platforms. Liz, if you want to stick around for 1 second, we're going to be bringing in Franklin Leonard, founder and CEO of The Blacklist. I know you know Liz, and so I'm going to let her stick around and maybe ask you a question or two. But Franklin, thanks for joining us. You're in London right now, so you're staying up very late.
I am indeed. It's good to be here, though.
So Franklin, The Blacklist, I want you to give a little bit of an explainer on it, but I think of it as this platform that democratizes writers' access to Hollywood, making sure that the producers can get access to scripts, whether it's someone writing in their house in Des Moines, Iowa, who knows no one in Hollywood, and then sort of creates this new ecosystem, trying to make a much more transparent, open marketplace. Is that fair?
I think that's a better description probably than I could have done. The only thing I'd add is that it's not just producers, it's agents, managers, actors, directors, really everybody who can make movies and television. But yeah, we're trying to be a platform that democratizes access so we can meritocratize the industry.
Meritocratize, democratize, and in attempting to do that, you are creating all of these partnerships with studios. I know you have a partnership with Google as well. Tell us what the latest is on your partnerships and what they aim to do.
Yeah, so a lot of our partnerships are really just designed to more efficiently help our partners find writers who they want to support. So we just announced earlier this week a partnership with the NRDC and the Redford Center to identify several writers who will get $10,000 each in mentorship from working screenwriters to develop a script that's specifically focused on environmental narratives, you know, Earth Day being this week. We have another partnerships with Hornitos Tequila to identify 3 writers who will get $15,000 each, basically to provide funding so they can make a short film as a proof of concept for their feature. We also have partnerships with Warner Media, with Macro, with MGM. And again, all of those are designed around, they have a specific need to find a specific kind of writer or a specific kind of project, and we can help them do that efficiently as something of a metal detector in a field full of haystacks.
Metal detector. Liz, I don't know if you want to weigh in here, or Franklin, ask Liz a question. I mean, it's interesting because Hello Sunshine really, in a lot of cases, looks to books as the original source of content to try to break through the Hollywood bubble.
We do. You know, it's interesting, Franklin. I've been following The Blacklist for a long time and such a fan of all that you have done and built. Just curious, over the last couple of years, as I think the industry has increasingly focused on, gosh, a lack of real diversity throughout, what have been like the 2 biggest changes you've seen at The Blacklist as a result of that sort of new focus?
I think we've seen a lot of interest in our business, frankly. You know, I think that what a lot of people have realized is that, look, the industry, we all on a day-to-day basis exist in a state of triage to some extent. There are too many scripts to read, too many books to read, too many pieces of material for any one person to consume it all. And so we rely on a bunch of other companies to do the filtering for us. And traditionally, that's the agencies and management companies, but they have their own biases and their own sort of failures of, identifying talent, whereas we sort of go direct to consumer, direct to the aspiring professional screenwriting community. And so when people say, I need to find a writer, or I want to make an effort to find more writers from historically underrepresented communities, it's a more efficient process to come to us than it is to come to the agencies who may not have identified those folks and who are more often than not relying on platforms like ours in order to find that next talent. So why not go directly to the source?
Yeah, interesting. And Franklin, do you have any questions for Liz? Since she's worked for so many years in the industry. She used to be at MRC, which was a much more traditional studio, though it did sell to companies like Netflix.
Well, it's funny because Liz and I actually have a shared background in both having worked at McKinsey & Company. And I'm curious, I've always been intrigued by the differences between sort of functioning outside of Hollywood and functioning inside of Hollywood when it comes to sort of day-to-day operations of business and how we do valuation on various assets. And I'm curious sort of how you think about that in your role and how it may differ from a lot of your peers and a lot of your collaborators when you think about, this is a good piece of business, I'm basing it on this analysis, and we'd like to move forward in this way. How frequently do you encounter folks that are thinking about it the same way or differently, and how?
No, it's a great question, I think, because it's been this interesting marriage. I've now been in Los Angeles for 13 years, but having had that experience at McKinsey and on Wall Street, you kind of have to bring both the right brain and the left brain and assume we're not all speaking kind of the same language or looking at things through the same filter. So one of the things that's been incredible at Hello Sunshine is we've got that mission and really strong brand definition, so I think that has been an incredible filter. And it's both about, for us, what helps sort of push our sort of mission forward, what's reflective of what is Hello Sunshine's brand and the stories we want to see told in the world. But then I think also too, we all agree that economic success, we can't be successful at fulfilling our mission if we're not also economically powerful too. So, I love the fact that there's actually less of the, business versus creative butting heads that one would think happens in Hollywood. But
I've always been a big believer that the best business plan is quality, especially when it applies to content. And so I actually agree with you. I think the marriage of the two, if you can make the best things, you have the best chance of making the most money.
Exactly.
Well, that is a good note for us to send you on your way, Liz. I'm going to say goodbye to you, but Franklin, stick around. I have a couple more questions actually on the McKinsey topic. But Liz, thank you. And I look forward to seeing that movie when it comes out. Good luck with production Monday.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, Liz.
Now, Franklin, you mentioned McKinsey, and we had you on CNBC just a couple of weeks ago to talk about this study that you helped McKinsey do of diversity in Hollywood. I know that you are working on doing on an op-ed for the New York Times about this with some specific recommendations. What is your message to Hollywood about diversity? Having seen all of the data that you found in this McKinsey study, what would you want the takeaways to be? And I'm curious if you could give us a little preview of your New York Times op-ed.
Well, look, I'm certainly not going to give any previews, but what I can say is that we need to do better, and we have needed to do much better for a very long time, and we need to do better because the sort of social and cultural consequences of not doing better are catastrophic, as we've seen, but also that there's a treasure map on offer. McKinsey's study was very clear about the fact that there is $10 billion a year in revenue being lost because of sort of anti-Black market bias. And, to put that in concrete terms, for any of these large studios that have, roughly a sixth of the market share, that is, $1.5 billion a year added to their bottom line. There are very few studios that have a single film that grosses that much in a single year, much less two in aggregate. So, most people would jump at the opportunity to claim that bounty. McKinsey has done this work for free to show that this bounty exists. And that $10 billion a year is only because of anti-Black market bias. It doesn't include things like anti-woman market bias and all the other communities, whether it be the Latinx community, the Asian Pacific Islander community, the MENA community, the disabled community, the LGBTQ community. There is a lot of money to be had by fixing the systematic bias that has existed in the industry for as long as the industry has existed.
Dee, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Hey, Franklin. So we were talking to Kevin Mayer earlier, and, I was asking him about the rise of these streaming giants and how they're all spending, tens of billions of dollars on content these days. And does that change the makeup of movies that get made, movies that get Oscar nominated and win? And I just wonder what you're seeing from your perspective. How has that changed what you've seen, or maybe not, at the Blacklist? Kevin Mayer said that, there's actually more of a tendency for them to target the more independent style movies, but it feels like on TV, we're talking all the time about how they're spending almost $1 billion on Knives Out sequels, right? And then Amazon with its Lord of the Rings that's going to cost $460 million or something. So where's that balance right now from where you're sitting?
I think it's likely that we're just going to see more of everything.
Okay.
Look, I think that, Netflix, Reed Hastings has been very clear for several years now that he sees his primary competitor as sleep. And if you're competing with sleep, you can't only have blockbusters and you can't only have, sensitive, nuanced, independent films. You can't only have premium television or only unscripted content. You have to have everything. And I think that what we're going to see is more movies, more television being made. And I think we've already sort of seen that. When it comes to what that content bundle looks like precisely, I can't claim to predict the future. I think, like Kevin said, it's virtually impossible to do that with any pinpoint accuracy. I also tend to be very data-driven, and these services still remain quite new. And so I'm reserving any optimism or pessimism, in fairness, for how that will change the bundle of things that are making until there's, sort of concrete evidence on a longitudinal way to make any conclusions.
So do you think it will get more selective? You're right. It feels like they're throwing everything at the wall right now. There's just so much money, but as the algorithms work, as the economy reopens, as maybe there's more competition than just sleep, do these companies get more selective, or is this just content arms war going to continue forever?
Look, I think that the content arms war will continue until it doesn't make economic sense for it to do so. But I think that really is how does the competition evolve? How does consumer behavior around consuming this content evolve? I think we've already seen a real evolution. I would argue that it's just an acceleration because of the pandemic of people consuming more content in their homes as opposed to watching them in the theaters. I don't necessarily I love going to the movie theater and watching a movie. I think it's critical that we preserve theatrical film culture societally and culturally. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if some films get distribution only on streaming or in day-to-date releases. I actually think that we were limited for the better part of the history of the industry by the theatrical model in terms of the sorts of movies that we made, who the audience, the audience we imagined for those films, and how much money, frankly, we could make on making those films.
Franklin, you could not have given me a better segue to bring in Tim and talk about Alamo Drafthouse. Tim League,
Hello.
President and founder of Alamo Drafthouse. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you heard that great setup that Franklin just gave you.
I did. Thank you very much, Franklin.
So Tim, Franklin was just talking about, whether you need to see movies in the theater, what types of movies you're seeing in the theater. And the thing that I've always loved about Alamo Drafthouse is that it's a really different kind of theatrical experience. It's not cookie cutter. It feels very boutique. It feels like going to the boutique hotel of movie theater chains. But now you filed for bankruptcy. You have a plan to come back from that. Tell us what is happening with Alamo Drafthouse as we look at the world opening up again post-pandemic.
Well, it's been a tough year, but the road ahead is actually quite green. I'm really optimistic about where we are. We have this one single data point of Godzilla versus Kong, and what I think is really interesting about that is polling our guests who came to see it, it was a big success for us. 75% of people that came to see that movie at the Alamo hadn't been to a movie since March of 2020. So this is what we're seeing is the emergence of the vaccinated coming back. And what do they miss most about being holed up in their home for over a year? It's getting out and having experiences out in the wild. And so I think that's just going to continue. I'm really encouraged by the pace of the vaccine rollout, and we're anticipating by Q3 that we'll be, approaching a normalcy. And my enemies, my competition isn't sleep necessarily like Reed Hastings, but my competition is not Reed Hastings. It's not Netflix.
It's not. You don't think your competition is HBO? I mean, like when you have HBO putting Godzilla in theaters and I can watch it at home. And we're going to see so much more of this simultaneous release.
Sure.
Isn't that going to change your business when people do, on some occasions, have the option of watching at home or have the option of waiting for an NBC Universal film, for Universal film, just waiting 3 weekends and then it's available at home?
Yeah, I that argument has been made, since the advent of television, right? And the theatrical industry has persevered and survived. VHS did not kill cinema, nor are streamers, because at our core, we're not competing against them because, you have a kitchen, but every once in a while you want to go to a restaurant, right? It's the same thing. And I crave getting out of the house. And I will, I stake a reputation as an exhibitor that what we offer is very, very special. I don't often cry on my couch at home watching something on a laptop, right? I cry often at the movies. There's a heightened emotional response of a giant screen, big sound, lights down, quiet auditorium, and you're completely lost and immersed in a story. That's the magic of cinema, and it was magic in the 20s. It's magic in the 2020s. So,
Tim, you know what we missed? We missed the clapping at the end of a movie. So when we watch movies at home, my husband insists that we all, including the 2 kids, have to clap at the end to recreate that feeling.
I like it.
Those of us who make films appreciate that immensely.
Yeah.
No, Franklin, I know you're a fan of the Alamo Drafthouse experience, and I'm curious if you want to jump in here for a question with Tim about what that experience is going to have to look like to get people out of their homes.
Well, it's interesting. I've long had a theory that one of the things that we're not talking enough about is the theatrical experience. There's always a focus on the best sound, the best screen quality. But I think what's interesting about the Alamo Drafthouse, and I think one of the things that theatrical, sort of exhibitors are going to have to do is offer something above and beyond a room in which to watch a movie. And I'm curious, Tim, how you think, you were sort of one of the first and certainly the biggest to sort of differentiate your theatrical experience from other theatrical experiences. And I'm curious how you think post-pandemic and in a more competitive environment for consumers' leisure time, how you think about differentiating that theater experience and making it something that makes it worth leaving the house above and beyond the quality of the film that a person's going to see.
Yeah, our perspective is that I believe we're an integral part. We're a partner with the content creators, right? And our role is to build audience and to build excitement and to create this special experience. So we look at the kind of customer journey of the first interaction with our website to approaching the theater, how the first person that you see approaches you, and all the way through the pre-show entertainment, the trailers, the cleanliness of the facility. We want to be top shelf. We want to make the investment in leaving your home for entertainment, and we want you to be dazzled. And I think that's what every out-of-home entertainment needs to look at, and in particular ours. And so we're going to keep doing what we've always done. I got into this business with zero experience in this business. I just, was a guy who loved movies, but that I love movies, and that is the core of how we entered this business and how we're going to succeed in the future is showcasing that love and that respect and that magic goosebump feeling when you have a perfect cinema experience. You can't touch it at home. So ergo, I'm not worried about the streaming revolution. We're gonna be just fine.
That's so interesting. Well, Franklin, I'm going to thank you and let you go on your way. Thank you so much for joining us. Tim, don't leave yet. We have some more questions for you. But Franklin, Leonard, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we'll talk to you again soon. We look forward to reading that op-ed. Now, Tim, you just alluded to this, but you were talking about sort of feeling like you're not competing with the small screen at home. But my question is, when you look at the types of films, we've talked about Godzilla versus Kong. We've mentioned that film's name so many times. The people at Warner Brothers must be very happy right now. But my real question is, do you think that we won't see the smaller films getting theatrical distribution? Will there be a tale of 2 types of movies where the superheroes and the Godzillas get top placement in theaters, and the smaller, more independent films end up on Netflix, and the independent film world ends up on Netflix and not in theaters?
Well, I'll give you one example, which I think pokes a little bit of holes in that, and that is, Best Picture winner from the last Oscars from Parasite. Parasite, is a movie that was a very small foreign language film, but through a very controlled release program, building up enthusiasm, building up word of mouth over the course of several months, it became this phenomenon. And that's what theatrical can do for small films, and has done that over and over and over and over again. So the fact that Parasite made $50 million at the box office would never have happened if it would have premiered on Amazon or Hulu. There would have been a fan base for it, but it would have been a much smaller blip. And so there's a specific type of independent film marketing that works with cinemas, and it works from this slower build and this ability to ramp up, and that's exceptional, and it is a very theatrical idea. And I look back in the pandemic, and one of the movies I'm most sad that I didn't get the opportunity to market and play around with is Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. Pretty small, medium-sized movie, but oh my gosh, I mean, I'm just overjoyed by it, and the idea of like little touches that we could do with a well-placed beverage, or a well-placed bowl of soup, or musical entertainment or pre-show, to just make people feel alive and special. Those types of movies we're going to continue to excel, and we'll help find an audience through the theatrical experience.
Dee, you want to jump in here? Did we lose her?
I love that you think about those things so much. To me, that is the experience that, I'm looking forward to. I've never been a fan of, the movie. We went to a moving seats movie once, theater, and it just threw us off so much. We like the old school experience. And you like it, Julia, or no?
No, once my husband took our kids to a movie, not realizing that they were going to be blasting cold air in his face, and the seat was going to be going like this the whole time.
My one exception is I go on opening weekend to the Fast and the Furious franchise in the moving seats. I do really like that, but it's got to be the right movie. But generally, movie, no, that's not where I go.
That seems fair. That seems like a movie that you do want to go and have that experience. But I love that you look at these small independent movies as something that you can add really interesting touches to. Tim, it's been such an interesting year in financial markets, right? We've seen this real love of nostalgia and throwback, whether that be GameStop or some of the other things that we've just seen, like, investors really taking to that. And it feels like that's the millennial audience, that's the millennials coming into the market. And I wonder, when the economy reopens, are they going to have that thirst for the old time movies, right? They've been bombarded with technology over the last year, so many screens for people who are working from home. Do you think that you could even see that sort of renaissance, that resurgence of millennial viewer who just wants to get back to the roots, doesn't want the IMAX screen, but wants the experience that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And we've actually seen that reflected in our attendance during the pandemic, because there weren't that many movies, and we were operating at, and still are operating at 25% capacity on the theaters that are open. And so that means we're augmenting our blockbusters when they come with a lot of repertory films. And so during the pandemic, almost about 50% of our revenue came from private theater rental, where you're with your pod or your family or group and rent a whole theater together. And the dominant force within those private rentals was really, feel-good, nostalgic movies, whether it's Ghostbusters or Goonies, kind of like not really serious-minded films. People were craving an escape during a really rough time for a lot of folks. And, we've always leaned into nostalgia. We have a weird mix where, 70% of our top line revenue is probably from big blockbuster type movies, but 20% are from independent films, and then 10% is from events or repertory movies. And so that's much larger than most other chains, because I think we're just a pack of movie nerds that loves the whole spectrum of films. We show over 2,000 movies a year at Alamo, and our next competitor is down in the hundreds. So we play a diverse slate, and we cater to little niche nostalgia driven audiences.
No, Tim, and I'm one of those nostalgia-driven audiences. I love seeing old movies in theaters. But my question is, I know this has been a very tough year, not just for Alamo, but for the entire theatrical movie business. You had to furlough workers. You now are reopening your theaters, but it's no question been a tough year. But my final question before we wrap up this stream is, when you look ahead to the year ahead and the years ahead, how do you think your industry, your theater business will be changed by COVID, both in terms of the experience that people want and also the types of movies that you are showing and studios are making?
I think it has been, it's no doubt about it, it's been a miserable year. But I like to hone in on some of the silver linings of the year. It's not often that you get to close a business and then reflect upon it. Like, how can we be better when we emerge out of COVID? So we've actually tried to focus some of our energies on that. We instituted an online portal where you can order your food in advance and pay with credit card in advance. This whole idea of taking a small theater, because we have some 20, 30 seat rooms, and reserving that for your group of friends, it's pretty magical, and it's pretty different for a lot of folks. And so I think the taking a deep scrub on your sanitation and cleanliness policies, really having a focus on the guests and how safe they feel in your environment. Those are a lot of positive things that are going to make us better coming out of COVID. But beyond that, I'm very old fashioned, I guess, with my reaction to moving seats. Right. I think that there's something about our offering of, like I say, like being in a darkened room and just getting lost in a story and having a heightened emotional response to the best of the best storytelling. It's magical, and I don't really want it to change too dramatically. We're going to continue to show a broad spectrum of films. I think after we're through our trauma, then people are going to watch they're not always going to be looking for just nostalgic feel good movies, but that'll be a certain segment of what we do. I suspect. Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go. Please finish your thought.
I think we're going to get back to normal, and it's going to feel wonderful in the very near future.
What a perfect note to end on. Optimism, moving past the nostalgia just to a more normal world. And I look forward to us all getting back to movie theaters and getting to do this in person at some point soon. Tim League, founder and president of Alamo Drafthouse, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to getting back to those theaters. And Deirdre, I want to go to a movie theater just as long as the chair isn't shaking and I have cold air being blasted.
And no cold wind blowing. Yeah, I'm with you, although I don't know. Maybe that's what the kids want.
Yeah, maybe. But Dee, thank you so much for joining me. And now I want you to go onto Netflix and Hulu and stream all these amazing films that for the first time you don't
I know,
have
I've
to
got a
leave your
few
house
days
to watch.
So Julia, what's your best picture pick? I'm going to watch that one first.
Pick on which one is which one's going to win. They're really different this year. I really like Judas and the Black Messiah and Promising Young Woman. I have to admit, I still haven't seen Sound of Metal or Minari, but those I'm going to see this weekend before the Oscars. But I did
see Judas. It was very good. That is
great. It's great. Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about this on Monday and see how many we can squeeze in over the weekend. Thank you, Dee. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.